Buenas. I'm Vanessa, the host of Chick Lit, a podcast where I share my unfiltered reviews of books I think women, Latinas, and millennials would enjoy. Please subscribe and follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Chick Lit Podcast, and enjoy today's episode on the book Beloved by Toni Morrison. There are 324 pages. I read this book on paperback because, again, people give you all of their books when they know you have a book review podcast. My really good friend Jane let me borrow this. Shout out to Jane. Hi, Jane. Because she knows that this book would be right up my alley. I'm going to go into a really long spiel on how much of a decorated writer Toni Morrison is, because I think it's really important to just highlight how amazing she is. Toni Morrison's works are praised for addressing the harsh consequences of racism in the United States and the Black American experience. She graduated from Howard University in 1953, earned a master's degree from Cornell University in 1955, and in 1957 she returned to Howard University, was married, and had 2 children before divorcing in 1964. Morrison was on the cover of Time magazine, making her only the second female writer of fiction and second Black writer of fiction to appear on what was perhaps the most significant U.S. magazine cover of the era. In spring 2006, the New York Times Book Review named Beloved the best work of American fiction published in the previous 25 years. Oprah selected a total of 4 of Morrison's novels over 6 years, giving Morrison's novels a bigger sales boost than they got from her Nobel Prize in 1993. The novelist also appeared 3 times on Oprah's show. I don't know about you guys, but I watched Oprah every single day after school with my mom from 4 to 5. We bonded over that and had very important conversations and sometimes arguments over the topics that Oprah talked about that day. Oprah's show, I think, molded our generation, and I'm definitely going to have to do an episode on one of her books. President Barack Obama presented Toni Morrison with the Presidential Medal of Freedom on May 29, 2012. She was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in 2020. Toni Morrison's first play, Dreaming Emmett, delves into the heartbreaking true story of Emmett Till, a Black teenager brutally murdered in 1955 by white men. Emmett's mother courageously held an open casket funeral to expose the world to the horrific reality of her son's fate. While it may feel like a distant tragedy, the woman responsible for Emmett's death only passed away this year in April of 2023. To put it in perspective, Emmett Till, if still alive, would be about the same age as Al Pacino, who recently welcomed a child with a woman in her 20s. It's crucial to acknowledge that racism hasn't vanished into the past. We must not allow the passage of time to diminish the impact of these injustices still occurring today. After the 2016 election of Donald Trump as president of the United States, Morrison wrote an essay, Making America White Again, published in the November 2016 issue of The New Yorker. In it, she argues that white Americans are so afraid of losing privileges afforded by their race that white voters elected Trump, who she described as being endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan, in order to keep the idea of white supremacy alive. I read the essay and love how she perfectly described that white and marginalized people love Trump because they want to preserve their status. It's based in fear rather than in power. I've linked the essay in the episode notes if you'd like to read it. I read Toni Morrison's book Sula because She Rose, birth postpartum advocate for Black people, named her daughter after the book. I wanted to see for myself what moved her so greatly that she decided to name her child after her. The book follows the lives of 2 Black women, Nell and Sula, in a small, predominantly Black community. Their friendships started in childhood because of their similar upbringings, experiencing poverty, prejudice, and abandonment. Nell embraces traditional roles as a wife and mother, while Sula, super independent and unafraid to challenge societal norms, becomes an outsider because of her unconventional lifestyle. Despite their different paths, their bond remains, though tested by misunderstandings, betrayals, and the harsh realities of their lives. The book explores the lives of Black women in America and does a great job of showcasing that Black women are not a monolith. The books I want to read next by Toni Morrison would be The Bluest Eyes. It's about a Black girl who longed to have blue eyes. Beloved is actually part of a trilogy. Jazz and Paradise come next. Jazz is told in language that imitates the rhythms of jazz music. The novel is about a love triangle during the Harlem Renaissance in New York City. Paradise is about citizens of an all-Black town. I don't think I'm creative enough to read Jazz, but I will just be able to get to Paradise. In the foreword, Toni Morrison lists writers with outrageous talent, and I encourage us all to read some of their work. Toni Cade Bambara, June Jordan, Gayle Jones, Lucille Clifton, Henry Dumas, Leon Forrest. She lists scholars with original ideas and hands-on research. I also recommend we read their work. William Hilton's Shen fan. Ivan Van Sertima's They Came Before Columbus, Karen DeCrow's Sexist Justice, Chinweizu's The West and the Rest of Us, and some public figures eager to set the record straight. They're the most mainstream on this list and will help guide you through life if you familiarize yourself with them. Angela Davis, Muhammad Ali, and Huey Newton. I remember teaching my students in Newark about Muhammad Ali and how he went to jail for avoiding the draft, and I had teachers' aides in the classroom with me, and they were asking a lot of questions and having really important discussions. Those moments make me miss teaching, but I digress. If you feel uncomfortable about the topics I've discussed so far, I urge you to listen to the entire episode. We will be discussing chattel slavery, so please prioritize understanding over comfort. If you've listened to my other episodes, you know I won't go into graphic details, but I will share difficult topics and important information. I promise that if humans were able to endure chattel slavery, liberate themselves from it, and exist beyond it, you can listen to me talk about it for 30 minutes on this podcast. I believe in you. You can do it. Beloved genres are historical fiction, classics, and magical realism, and was actually made into a film in 1998 by Oprah Winfrey. It has pretty bad reviews, but maybe one day I'll watch it. Beloved is written from a third-person omniscient point of view. The narrator is not a character in the story, but is an observer who knows the thoughts and feelings of all the characters. Books in this point of view kind of confuse me because it's hard for me to keep track of and recover from each person's mind. From one paragraph to the next, the book will go from remembering one person being enslaved in a cornfield 25 years ago to being in the present day, being freed, laying in bed together. It's hard for my simple mind to track going back and forth from very different times and several different characters. The book also has a whimsical, poetic vibe to it. Yes, it's a story with main characters and goes through the stages of a story with an exposition, a rising action, climax, falling action, and a conclusion. But Toni Morrison adds a sense of beauty and depth and care to it that I've personally never experienced when reading a book before. For this episode, I don't even want to call this segment El Chisme because chisme means gossip, and we're talking about slavery, so I don't want to make this topic cute and fun, but for the sake of the podcast, this is the chisme part of the episode where I share facts and context for the book. So I'll be referring to slave owners as what they actually are, which is terrorists. We know that what we learned about slavery was, and currently still is, whitewashed, so I want to be extremely conscious of not watering that down and sharing what actually happened. The term slaves to me dehumans the people, so I will be referring to them as enslaved people to remind us each and every single time that we refer to them that they were people. I will also be referring to plantations as sites of human misery for obvious reasons. In the foreword on page 16, Toni Morrison shares insight on women's plight and Black women's plight. She says, "I think now it was the shock of liberation that drew my thoughts to what free could possibly mean to women. In the 80s, the debate was still roiling. Equal pay, equal treatment, access to professions, schools, and choice without stigma. To marry or not, to have children or not. Inevitably, these thoughts led me to the different history of Black women in this country. A history in which marriage was discouraged, impossible, or illegal, in which birthing children was required, but having them, being responsible for them, being, in other words, their parent, was as out of the question as freedom." Damn, Toni. She just, really laying it all out there for us. It's beautiful. She's a great, concise writer. I love that. What made Toni Morrison write this book, Beloved, was remembering a newspaper clipping that summarized the story of Margaret Garner, a young mother who, having escaped slavery, was arrested for killing one of her children and trying to kill the others, instead of letting them be returned to the terrorists. She had the intellect, ferocity, and willingness to risk everything for what was to her the necessity of freedom. Horrifying. The following snippets about slavery were described throughout the book. Whole towns were wiped clean of Black people, 87 lynchings in 1 year in Kentucky, 4 colored schools burned to the ground, grown men whipped like children, children whipped like adults, women raped by many at once, property taken, necks broken. Enslaved people felt that white people were playing checkers with them. Anyone who they loved who had not run off or been hanged got rented out, loaned out, bought up, brought back, stored up, mortgaged, won, stolen, or seized. It was risky for a used-to-be enslaved woman to love anything too much. Best thing one of the characters knew to do was to love just a little bit, so when they broke a loved one's back or shoved them in a sack, maybe you would have a little bit of love left over for the next one. They oftentimes didn't really know their mothers. Enslaved people oftentimes didn't really know their mothers. She was too busy working. One of the main characters, who you'll learn about later, Sethe, her mom showed her 2 markings on her body and told her this could be a way to identify her if anything ever happened to her. They ended up hanging her, and Sethe doesn't know why they hung her. They couldn't share much while working because it would interrupt their labor. Baby Shugs, another character you'll hear about later, didn't know where her children were buried or what they looked like if they were still alive. She had 8 kids with 6 men because of all the shuffling around the terrorists did with their lives. She knew more about her kids than she knew about herself because she was never able to explore what she liked. In her last days, she started thinking about colors. Blue, green, yellow, pink. Could she sing well? Was she pretty? Was she a good friend? Could she have been a loving mother, a faithful wife? Does she have a sister, and does she favor her? If her mother knew her, would she like her? All the things she was never able to consider as an enslaved person. Paul D., another character you'll learn about in a minute, tried to escape or find a permanent escape of slavery 5 times, and each attempt was frustrating. He had fought on both sides of the Civil War, walked all the way to New Jersey, and saw so many terrible things, until finally one day he helped someone unload some luggage, and the man paid Paul D. some money. He was able to buy himself some vegetables. It made him glow, and that's when he decided that to eat, walk, and sleep anywhere was life as good as it got. So he did it for several years until he found Sethe. Now for Lo Bueno, which also sounds terrible when talking about slavery. Sweet Home terrorists were not like traditional terrorists at the time because they allowed the enslaved people to have guns, buy themselves out of slavery, have a choice in who they married, didn't force them to mate, and didn't whip them or beat them. As an enslaved person there, Baby Shugs was mostly inside with the wife. Hallie, one of Baby Shugs' sons, was there, along with Paul A., Paul D., and Paul F., a man named Sixo, and lastly they brought Sethe to choose which of the men she wanted to marry. She chose Hallie because he loved his mom so much that he bought her freedom. That's like a saying, right? To pay attention to how a man treats his mom because that's how he'll treat you, right? Like something like that. Hallie bought Baby Shug's freedom by renting himself out on his 1 day off a week to local sites of human misery. He learned how to read and count so he wouldn't be scammed by white people, and built contraptions around his mother's house to make her life easier, like getting in and out of bed. Baby Shugs doesn't see the point in being freed because, and I'm quoting her here, there's not a house in the country that ain't packed to the rafters with some dead Negro's grief. Freedom from slavery didn't mean a thing to her when she was still living in the racist conditions of America. On the page 102, she says that she decided that because slave life had busted her legs, back, head, eyes, hands, kidneys, womb, and tongue, she had nothing left to make a living with but her heart, which she put to work at once, accepting no title of honor before her name, but allowing a small caress after it. She became an unchurched preacher, one who visited pulpits and opened her great heart to those who could use it. In winter and fall, she carried it to different churches. She let her great heart beat in their presence. When warm weather came, Baby Shugs, followed by every black man, woman, and child who could make it through, took her great heart to the clearing, a wide open place cut deep in the woods, nobody knew for what, at the end of the path, known only to deer and whoever cleared the land in the first place. In the heat of every Saturday afternoon, she sat in the clearing while the people waited among the trees. After situating herself on a huge flat-sided rock, Baby Shugs bowed her head and prayed silently. The company watched her from the trees. They knew she was ready when she put her stick down. Then she shouted, "Let the children come," and they ran from the trees toward her. "Let your mothers hear you laugh," she told them, and the woods rang. The adults looked on and could not help smiling. Then, "Let the grown men come," she shouted. They stepped out one by one from among the trees. "Let your wives and your children see you dance," she told them, and the ground life shuddered under their feet. Finally, she called the women to her. "Cry," she told them, "for the living and the dead, just cry," and without covering their eyes, the women let loose. It started that way. Laughing children, dancing men, crying women, and then it got mixed up. Women stopped crying and danced. Men sat down and cried. Children danced. Women laughed. and children cried until exhausted, gasping for breath. In the silence that followed, baby Shug's Holy offered up to them her great big heart. So beautiful. She's creating such a safe space for everyone and community healing. Love her. Around the time that Hallie and Sethe were supposed to be escaping to baby Shug's home, Hallie disappeared, never to be found again. Sethe sent their 3 kids, 2 boys and the unnamed girl, ahead to meet her at baby Shug's house because she was pregnant with Denver. On the way to baby Shug, she was laying alone in pain when she heard a voice saying, "Who's in there?" It was a white girl, Amy Denver, who was also running from something. Their entire time together, Sethe was skeptical and thought her luck would run out, and this white girl would return her to her torturers. Amy ended up helping her get to a house for shelter, rubbed her feet, and walked her to a river where she gave birth to Denver. This is where Stamp Paid found Sethe and Denver. He was part of the Underground Railroad, where he helped enslaved people escape and get to their destination safely. He brought them to baby Shug's house, and about a month later, to celebrate the girls making it through their journey, Stamp Paid brought some berries, which got baby Shug's to host a grand old party where everyone in town came by to celebrate. Friends and neighbors got angry because she overstepped, gave them too much, and offended them by excess. I guess they got jealous that they didn't have that much love to give, and they ended up calling the kidnappers, also known as slave catchers, to come get Sethe. And that's when she killed her unnamed child to spare her of slavery. The house got quiet and lonely after that. People stopped coming around. This took a toll on baby Shugs. To belong to a community, to love and be loved, to counsel and be counseled, protect and be protected, feed and be fed, and then to have that community step back and hold itself at a distance. Well, it could wear anyone out. She gave up and died while Sethe was in jail. When Sethe got out of jail, Howard and Bulger, her 2 boys, ran away because they thought they'd be killed next. She never saw them again. She raised Denver in that same home, just the 2 of them. Denver plays with the baby ghost quietly every day for her entire life. For the next 20 years, she only knows 3 people outside of her mother. Lady Jones, the woman who teaches her letters, Stamp Paid, the man that was part of the Underground Railroad, and the baby ghost. Paul D., one of the enslaved men at Sweet Home that I mentioned earlier, was always in awe of big black families when he came across them traveling across America. He always made everyone list out whose kid was whose auntie was whose, how old they were. He loved seeing big black families. Paul D. spends like 20 years walking all over. On page 78, he describes his time walking. During, before, and after the war, he had seen Negroes so stunned or hungry or tired or bereft, it was a wonder they recalled or said anything, who, like him, had hidden in caves and fought owls for food, who, like him, stole from pigs, who, like him, slept in trees in the day and walked by night, who, like him, had buried themselves in slop and jumped in wells to avoid regulators, raiders, patter rollers, veterans, hillmen, posses, and merrymakers. Once he met a Negro about 14 years old who lived by himself in the woods and said he couldn't remember living anywhere else. He saw a witless colored woman jailed and hanged for stealing ducks she believed were her own babies. Move, walk, run, hide, steal, and move on. So that was his experience being a free person. He ends up going to visit baby Shugs at her home and finds Sethe raising Denver. Paul D. was a warm man who women open up to. Denver was distraught and lonely because everyone was afraid of their haunted house and wouldn't be friends with her. Sethe was distraught because of all the things she went through, and Paul D. still did not know that Sethe had killed her child and was comforting her when the baby ghost attacked him. He lashed out at it, scaring it away. This left Denver even more lonely since the baby ghost was the only friend she ever knew. After the ghost went away, Sethe and Paulie D have a sense of healing from sharing their grief with each other. Paul D decides to stay with them and offers to take them to the carnival. While there, the first time Denver ever went to a social event, she noticed that people were kinder to her. As I was reading this, I was thinking maybe it was the presence of a man, or maybe the presence of a man made Denver feel better about herself, and that was when she noticed that no one really hated her. What we learned later on is that everyone was just like surprised that there was a man keeping them company because Sethe had killed her child. On their way back from the carnival, a sick stranger named Beloved came to their property, and Denver took care of her because she was so lonely, and Sethe let her take charge. let her take charge of taking care of her. I think it's important for kids to have like authority over something and make decisions with parental supervision. So as I was reading this, it made sense to me that Sethe was checking in with Denver and asking her, like, does she have a fever? Is she eating? Is she drinking water? So that Denver could have a sense of responsibility. Paul D thinks Beloved is faking her sickness. She knows things about Sethe and knows what questions to ask. This makes me start to wonder, like, is Beloved the ghost baby reincarnated? Eventually, Sethe shares that at the unnamed baby's funeral, the baby that she killed, the priest or the pastor, I don't know which one because I'm not religious, so sorry, but he had said, "Dearly beloved," and since Sethe only had enough money to put one word on the tombstone, she named the baby Beloved. On page 252, "I come out of blue water after the bottoms of my feet swim. Away from me I come up. I need to find a place to be. The air is heavy. I'm not dead. I'm not. There's a house there, is what she whispered to me. I am where she told me. I'm not dead. I sit. The sun closes my eyes. When I open them, I see the face I lost. Sethe's is the face that left me. Sethe sees me, see her, and I see the smile. Her smiling face is the place for me. It is the face I lost. She is my face smiling at me, doing it at least. A hot thing. Now we can join a hot thing." I actually had to Google this part because the snippet that I just shared, they were so confusing to me, but turns out that those pages they symbolize the collective consciousness of enslaved people. It blends past and present and creates a powerful and haunting depiction of enduring the trauma of slavery. And that's just one of the parts that reminds me most of poetry, because there's no punctuation. It's just a stream of consciousness, and it doesn't follow the rules of grammar. So it's super powerful and just kind of strips all the rules, so it's raw. I think you just see what Toni Morrison was saying, and it's just impactful. Once Sethe realizes that Beloved is her baby that she killed, it's a huge relief for her. Now she can make up for what she did by solely focusing on Beloved. She's cooking, sewing, doing her hair, playing dress up, singing her lullabies, giving her the best parts of cake and milk, and she started to completely shut Denver out of the activities. She got so lost in doing whatever Beloved wanted, she got fired from her job. Without income, they started to go hungry. If they had 2 eggs, Beloved got both. Denver decided to go into town and meet with the old school teacher, Lady Jones, and told her they didn't have food. Everyone in town, whether it was from guilt from abandoning baby Shugs or they were being Christian and giving to people in times of need, they all started to give them a little bit of something to get by, some eggs, some meat, etc. Sethe was scared because she believed Beloved would leave before she could understand that anybody white could take your whole self for anything that came to mind, not just to work, kill, or maim you, but dirty you so bad that you couldn't like yourself anymore, dirty you so bad you forgot who you were and couldn't think it up, and how Sethe could never let it happen to her own. People in town started to worry about Sethe, and so they all came to the house to confront Beloved, but Beloved ran away, never to be seen again. Denver started to work to take care of her mom, and Paul D came back to help out and take care of her too. Toni Morrison did a really nice job of showing us the different ways in which the traumas of slavery affected people, and so now it's up to Denver to move on. For Lo Malo portion of the episode, where I say, what I didn't like about the book, I would say from an entertainment perspective, I would have liked to have had closure with Hallie, but this was a sad reality for enslaved people. They often didn't know what happened to loved ones, leaving them to wonder. I would have liked the next book to be about Denver, but we know the time period just doesn't match up. I would have loved to see Denver at peace and have a beautiful life and have a husband and kids. I would have liked to read that because that's the type of books that I like. I'm annoying, I know. The next few books I'll be doing episodes on are Snowed In by Catherine Walsh, Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis, Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry, and Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. So if you want to listen to those so that you can be in on the next episodes, that'd be great. That'd be fun. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. New episodes are uploaded on Friday mornings, and you can also follow me on social media and YouTube at Chick Lit Podcast. And remember, if you have any book recommendations, send them my way. Thanks for listening.